My name's Michael. I'm 38, and I've been in freight logistics for almost 15 years. You know those anonymous trucks that deliver refrigerated goods to grocery stores at 3 a.m.? Yeah, my fingerprints are all over that system. I specialize in cold chain freight, which is a fancy way of saying, if it needs to stay below 40 degrees Fahrenheit to not kill someone, I've probably helped move it. For 6 years, I worked as a freight planner and risk compliance lead at a mid-sized logistics firm based out of Kansas City. Not one of the giants, but big enough to have regional contracts with national co-ops and food chains. We handled the routing, insurance, and temperature-controlled scheduling for things like produce, dairy, and poultry. In this line of work, you don't make the news unless someone screws up and a truckload of chicken goes septic on I-40. Which brings me to him. His name was Colby, 33 years old, finance background, teeth so white they looked government-issued. I remember the first time I met him. It was the Monday after our longtime VP of operations retired. I walked into the office with my usual thermos of black coffee and the same scuffed boots I'd worn since I joined the company. Colby was already in the bullpen, practically glowing. Crisp blazer, Bluetooth in one ear, holding court with a group of junior analysts like some kind of corporate youth pastor. He saw me, extended a perfectly moisturized hand and said, "Michael, right? Mind if I call you Mike?" I hate being called Mike. The guy reeked of sandalwood and strategic disruption. Said he came from a startup in Denver that optimized regional freight flow through data-forward AI models. I later Googled that company. It went bankrupt after 3 years and a class action lawsuit involving unpaid drivers. But I digress. Colby had a plan, and like most plans hatched by overconfident men who've never actually stepped into a refrigerated trailer in Mississippi in July, it was going to be a disaster. But not immediately. At first, he just did little things. Changed the fonts on our routing documents. Renamed high-risk corridors as efficiency opportunities. Got rid of our old-fashioned but rock-solid mileage calculator and replaced it with a web-based dashboard that required 2 logins and crashed every time it rained. He loved meetings. Not real meetings, performances. He'd stand up and say things like, "Logistics isn't about trucks. It's about trust, and we're leaving money on the table by ensuring fear." I remember writing that one down. Ensuring fear. Like that meant something. To be fair, he wasn't stupid. He understood just enough about numbers to be dangerous. But he didn't understand failure. Real failure. Not a line graph that dips or a quarterly KPI that misses target, but actual product loss. Legal liability. Litigation from spoiled goods. Because in states like Florida, under UCC Article 2, if you deliver non-conforming goods, say, a truckload of heat-spoiled poultry, you're not just replacing the shipment. You're liable for consequential damages. That includes anything from restaurant shutdowns to civil suits. I tried explaining that. He smiled, leaned back in his ergonomic chair and said, "Mike, that's old-school fear-based thinking. What we need is velocity. Trust the system. Let the data drive." I should have walked out right then, but I didn't, because I already knew the road he was walking down. And I was curious what it looked like when someone like Colby drove straight into a ditch at full speed. All I had to do was buckle up, watch, and wait. The storm started with strawberries. I wish I were being poetic. I'm not. It was actual strawberries, organic, pesticide-free, grown in some boutique Californian valley where they play Mozart to the plants or whatever. One of our newer clients, a high-end produce co-op, had signed on 6 months prior. Their whole pitch was premium perishables. Their buyers were private schools, country clubs, vegan chains. The kind of places where customers inspect their salads like they're verifying diamonds. That week, we were shipping them 3 full reefers. Lettuce, strawberries, and free-range chicken. All bound for Florida. Timing mattered. Insurance mattered. And temperature? That was the gospel. I reviewed the routing as usual. Standard stuff. 2 trucks straight down I-55, the third swinging through Memphis for a final pickup before heading southeast. That third one made my neck itch. Memphis in July is a freight nightmare. Blacktop temperatures hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit easy. Refrigerated units overheat, drivers fry in their cabs, and utility companies start rolling blackouts that mess with fuel stations. If you've been in the business long enough, you develop a sixth sense. And mine was flaring like a bad knee before a thunderstorm. So I did my job. I flagged the Memphis corridor in our routing tool. Then I wrote a short escalation email, just 3 paragraphs, bullet points, forecast links, and a suggestion to reroute through Nashville. It would cost an extra $1,300 in fuel and time. Chump change compared to a spoiled load. I sent it to Colby. Subject line, Memphis corridor, risk flagged. He replied 20 minutes later from his iPhone. Appreciate the detail, Mike. But I reviewed the numbers. That corridor is high efficiency. Let's not overthink this. We're not paying you to worry. Just send it. I read that line 3 times. We're not paying you to worry. That one stuck to my ribs like bad barbecue. Not just the arrogance of it, the blind, NBA-drunk confidence, but the way he made it sound like caution was a flaw. That risk management was some boomer paranoia. I didn't argue. I just replied, understood. Routing is requested. Because here's the thing, in Kansas, where our company was based, freight liability follows the Carmack Amendment under federal law. That means carriers are liable for actual loss or damage to goods unless they can prove an act of God, shipper error, or inherent defect. None of which applied to strawberries melting in a sweltering reefer because a man in a blazer wanted to trim insurance costs to hit a slide deck metric. So I sent it. I logged the risk in our internal system. I archived the email. I saved a copy of the forecast and tucked it into my personal Google Drive. Then I went home, made a bourbon neat, sat on my porch, and watched the Kansas heat shimmer off the street like a mirage. That's when it started to dawn on me. Colby wasn't just dangerous. He was exactly the kind of person who'd panic when it all went to hell and try to throw someone like me under the bus to save his reputation. And that's when I started planning. The call came at 3:42 a.m. I was already awake, half asleep on the couch with a box fan blowing over my legs and an old car talk rerun whispering from my laptop. July nights in Kansas are like sleeping in a steam room unless your AC's heroic and mine was losing the battle. The phone buzzed. Dispatch. I picked up on the second ring. Mike, the voice said. We got a problem. Truck 812. The one on Memphis corridor. I sat up, gut already tightening. What happened? Reefer unit failed outside Jackson, Tennessee. Driver says the generator overheated. Backup kicked in 4 hours later. Temp logs show internal temps hit 64 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't say anything for a full 5 seconds. You don't need to be in this business to understand how catastrophic that number is. Cold freight standards for raw poultry are 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. For leafy greens and berries, you want to hold at around 34 degrees Fahrenheit. At 64, bacteria starts multiplying like it's spring break in Miami. What's the cargo? I asked, though I already knew. Lettuce, chicken, and strawberries. Of course. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Condition? Chicken sweating. Lettuce is already browning. Strawberries are soft. Pallets shifting. Driver says it smells like a compost pile. Perfect. I didn't scream. Didn't cuss. Just opened my laptop and checked the route confirmation. There it was. Memphis corridor. Colby's signature on the approval sheet. I'd CC'd him. I had red receipts. I even had the Slack thread where I'd raised the red flag. I was covered. Legally. Professionally. But I wasn't calm. Not because I was at risk, but because I knew exactly what was coming next. He was going to panic. I got to the office by 6 a.m. The warehouse manager, Lupe, was already pacing. I nodded to her. She nodded back. No words needed. I printed out everything. Routing logs, insurance documents, internal risk escalations, weather forecasts. At 8:07 a.m., Colby strolled in wearing that same pine-scented cologne and a linen shirt like he'd just come from a yacht party. He had coffee in one hand, sunglasses perched on his head. He looked at me and smiled. Morning, Mike. Big day. Q3 planning after lunch. You good? I stared at him. You check your email? He froze for a fraction of a second. That tiny flicker of a blink freeze where your brain catches up with a memory you don't want. No, not yet. You should. 5 minutes later, he was in the conference room, red-faced, pacing. Legal was on the line. The CFO was forwarding client contracts. Someone in marketing had already texted, "Is it true a client's load got nuked?" The total value of the shipment was $782,600. The insurance coverage? Capped at $250,000 thanks to Colby's optimization. The client, our boutique co-op, was already on their second phone call. Furious. Demanding answers. They were one of the few who prepaid freight. They weren't going to sit quietly while nearly $500,000 of premium perishables turned into landfill material. And Colby? He looked like a guy watching a match he let start burning his whole front lawn. He pulled me aside around noon. "Mike, listen. This isn't ideal, obviously. But we need to manage the narrative here." There it was. The first ripple in the waters. The moment where I knew for sure he wasn't just going to take responsibility. He was going to rewrite the story. And if I wanted the truth to survive, I had to get ready to speak it loudly. By noon, Colby was sweating, and not from the July heat. His blazer was off, sleeves rolled up, hair fluffed from running his hand through it 100 times. He paced like a man trying to outwalk bad news. And the news kept coming. The client, let's call them Greenstone Co-op, wasn't just pissed. They were organized. They'd already sent a formal complaint through our internal portal. Attached were photos from the Memphis unload, crates of strawberries, puddled and bruised like rotting plums, lettuce with brown edges curling like burnt paper, chicken that looked suspiciously gray. At 1 p.m., Colby called a full staff meeting. Marketing, dispatch, compliance, operations. He waited until we were all in the room, then started his little speech. "I want to start by saying this isn't about pointing fingers. It's about learning. Okay? We had a systems failure. Insurance misalignment. Routing assumptions. All fair game." He said routing assumptions while side-eyeing me like I was a ghost only he could see. I stayed quiet. Just sipped my coffee. I'd switched from bourbon to black roast now, sharpened my focus. Then came the kicker. Colby clicked a slide. Yeah, he brought a PowerPoint to a freight failure postmortem. The first bullet read, "Operational oversight failure to flag corridor risk." I raised an eyebrow. He kept talking. "Now, I'm not saying anyone did anything wrong," he said, voice smoothing out like he was reading bedtime stories. "But protocol is protocol. If high-risk corridors aren't escalated and mitigation isn't confirmed, well, that's a procedural miss." Heads started turning. Eyes landed on me. My heart didn't even race. That was the scary part. I was calm. Calm in that way a sniper must feel when the wind stills and the scope steadies. This wasn't panic. This was execution. I waited until he finished his corporate babble, then raised my hand like a student in Sunday school. "Sorry, just to clarify, are you saying routing oversight was on ops?" Colby tilted his head, gave a tight smile. "Not you specifically, Mike. It's the process. It's systemic." "Cool," I said. "Just wanted to be sure. Because I've got the memo I sent you. Timestamped. With the Memphis corridor flagged. Forecasts attached. Alternate route proposed. You replied, quote, 'Let's not overthink this. Just send it.'" The room got quiet. Like funeral quiet. Colby's smile faltered, lips pressed into a thin line. "I'm sure we had a dialogue." "We didn't," I cut in. "You replied in under 20 minutes. I flagged the risk. You overrode it. And you cut the insurance coverage. Also documented. Also signed." Someone in finance, Becca, I think, choked on her La Croix. I reached into my folder and handed out printed packets. Routing approvals, Slack messages, insurance policy adjustments. Even the call log from dispatch. Colby didn't speak. Someone from marketing muttered, "Holy shit." He looked around like a drowning man scanning for a lifeboat. But he was already chest deep in it, and I wasn't offering rope. He tried to salvage it with a line I'll never forget. "Guys, it's not about blame, okay? It's about process." I smiled. "Sure." And the process failed when someone decided they knew more than the people they were paid to trust. Colby left the room 10 minutes later, face like wet ash. No blazer. No bounce. Just a man who'd realized the narrative was no longer his to control. And I hadn't even started yet. The next day felt like the quiet after a tornado. Nobody said much. Colby didn't show up until close to 10 a.m., and when he did, he walked past my office without making eye contact. That was fine. I wasn't in the mood for eye contact. I was in the mood for war. A quiet one. The kind you fight with documentation, timing, and silence. The best kind, really. See, when someone like Colby starts rewriting history, they don't do it all at once. They test the waters. A slide in a meeting. A phrase like we instead of I. It's a creeping virus. You don't fight that with yelling or office gossip. You fight it with tripwires, truths laid like mines under their every step. So I got to work. First, I printed everything. Every internal message, every version of the routing plan, every quote from the insurance underwriter showing Colby's requested cap reduction. Then I made 3 copies, one for my home safe, one for my lawyer, and one for an undisclosed location, aka my buddy Nate's garage in Overland Park. I didn't just cover my ass, I sandbagged the entire perimeter. Then I started listening. Quietly. I heard whispers from HR that legal was reviewing risk exposure. Someone in the dispatch department told me Colby had made a panicked call to the CEO's assistant asking if old routing systems were still being logged. That meant he was looking for a place to offload blame, but he was starting to realize he'd walked barefoot into a field full of broken glass. Meanwhile, the client, Greenstone Co-op, had gone completely cold. No returned calls. No emails. Which, in our business, means one thing: they're already talking to other vendors. And Colby? He started holding closed-door meetings with finance and compliance. Performance touch points, he called them. Not officially disciplinary. Just checking the temperature. The irony. One afternoon, Becca from finance bumped into me by the copier. She leaned in and whispered. He asked me if we could write off the claim as a vendor exception to shift liability. I blinked. Vendor exception? That's code for blaming the driver. I shook my head. Our driver logged every checkpoint. Temp logs were recorded. No deviation. The reefer failed. And it was a company-approved route. She nodded. I know. I just thought you should know where his head's at. So that was the plan. Colby wasn't just trying to dodge it, he was trying to stick it to the lowest guy on the ladder. That's when the last thread snapped for me. Because whatever issues I had with this company, with the politics, the fatigue, even the bureaucracy, I never blamed the drivers. They were out there every day in 100-degree heat, sleeping in cabs, dodging DOT inspections, and praying their reefer units didn't die outside Little Rock at 3 a.m. And now this clown in a linen shirt wanted to pin his arrogance on a guy making $60,000 and running on Monster and gas station coffee? No, not on my watch. So I picked up the phone and called an old contact. His name was Evan, and he happened to be Greenstone's new logistics advisor. And he remembered me. Evan picked up on the second ring. He used to work in procurement at one of our old client companies before he left the rat race to do logistics without selling his soul, as he put it. When Greenstone Co-op started building their in-house freight program, they brought him on as a consultant. Good guy. Dry wit. Wore the same faded Kansas Jayhawks hat to every meeting. Michael R., he said, dragging out the like a used car salesman. Haven't heard your voice in what, 2 disasters? I laughed. 1.5. This one's still cooking. He knew exactly what I meant. I take it this call isn't about catching up? Not entirely. You still at Greenstone? I am. And I'm guessing this has something to do with the truckload of lukewarm produce my boss called a soggy pile of trust issues. I winced. That'd be the one. There was a pause. Then Evan said, "You free for coffee tomorrow?" I was. We picked a dive diner off I-70, neutral ground with bad coffee and better privacy. The kind of place where truckers still call the waitress ma'am and nobody asks what you're talking about as long as you tip in cash. When I got there, Evan was already in a booth sipping something that looked like transmission fluid. He slid a manila folder across the table. That's our exit paperwork. We're cutting ties with your company. Effective end of month. I nodded. I figured. You want to tell me what the hell happened? So I did. I walked him through the whole thing, the insurance slash, the Memphis corridor, the flagged risk, Colby's just send it reply. I even showed him the email. Evan read it twice, then let out a low whistle. Man thought he could outsmart July in Tennessee, he muttered. That's a special kind of stupid. I think he honestly believed insurance was optional. You're not gonna get fired over this? I shook my head. No. I documented everything. He's trying to shift blame, but the paper trail is clean. He leaned back and smirked. Then why are we here? Because I'm done, I said. I'm tired of watching amateurs set fires and hand me the extinguisher. I want out. Evan's expression didn't change, but his voice did. You're thinking about jumping ship? Not thinking. Planning. Another pause. Then he nodded once slowly. We're expanding our internal ops. Putting together a real team. Not just spreadsheets, people who know how to move things that rot. I leaned in. You want someone to build it? We want someone to own it. We shook hands. No contract. No promises. Just mutual understanding over bad coffee and shared war stories. As I walked out to my truck, the Kansas wind picked up. I rolled down the window, breathing in dry summer air and the scent of a new start. Back at the office the next day, Colby was wearing a fake smile and a tighter collar. He didn't know it yet, but his kingdom had just sprung a leak. And I had one hand on the valve. I typed the email 3 times before I hit send. Not because I was unsure I wasn't, but because when you've put in 6 years at a place, even one that's gone sour, you don't just write "I quit" and drop the mic. You weigh it. You taste the words before you send them. Subject line: notice of resignation. Just 10 sentences. Professional, respectful, and cold enough to keep lawyers from sniffing around. 2 weeks notice. Will assist with transition. Grateful for opportunities. I sent it at 6:58 a.m. before anyone else was in the office. By 8:30, the building felt like someone had pulled a fire alarm no one could hear. Slack messages lit up like a Christmas tree. A few folks in ops pinged me directly. You serious? What happened? Please tell me you're not leaving us with Colby. I didn't answer right away. Let it settle. Colby didn't come to my office. He summoned me to his. Of course he did. I walked in, calm as ever. He stood behind his glass desk, arms crossed like a principal trying to look disappointed. He gestured at a chair. I didn't sit. So, he said, you're leaving. Correct. Can I ask why? You can. Silence. Then, cautiously, is this about the Greenstone incident? I tilted my head. The one where you ignored risk recommendations, capped insurance coverage, and tried to pin the fallout on my department? His nostrils flared slightly. He composed himself, lips pressed tight. Look, Mike, things got tense. But I really thought we'd moved past that. You're a valuable part of the team. No, Colby. I'm a necessary part of the team. There's a difference. That hit. He blinked. I just wish you'd come to me before deciding, he said. We could have worked something out. Maybe even a performance review. Promotions are coming. There's nothing you can offer me that I want, I said. And respectfully, I think you know that. He was silent again, but this time it wasn't strategic. He didn't know what to say, because what do you say to a man you tried to throw under the bus? Who just climbed out, dusted off his jacket, and walked away while the wheels were still spinning. I nodded once, turned, and walked out. Later that afternoon, HR called me in to discuss transition. I laid everything out clean, gave them the documentation they needed. Didn't badmouth Colby. Didn't have to. The numbers were already doing it for me. The Greenstone contract had officially been severed. We'd lost one of our top 3 clients. Word was spreading in our network. Quiet conversations between regional supply managers, vendor leads, food service buyers. Reputation damage in logistics is like black mold. Invisible at first, then suddenly it's everywhere and the whole structure starts rotting from the inside. I didn't burn the bridge. I just walked off it. Then I turned around and let the weight of Colby's own arrogance finish the job. My first day at Greenstone didn't feel like a first day at all. No buzzwords. No onboarding presentations. No alignment meetings led by people who'd never touched a logistics chain. Evan just handed me a laptop, a black coffee, and said, "Here's the list of vendors we trust. The rest, cut them." That was it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt useful again. We weren't some bloated corporation trying to impress investors with 6-month projections. We were moving food, real product, for clients who cared. And Evan had convinced the board to let me design the cold freight infrastructure from scratch. So I did. I brought in a dispatcher I knew from back in the day, Nancy, a battle-tested Navy vet who ran route optimization in her sleep. Found a couple of independent drivers with top-shelf reefer rigs who cared more about temp logs than Spotify playlists. I wrote actual SOPs, not the theoretical garbage Colby used to pull off Reddit and pass off as innovation. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sleek. But it worked. In the first 60 days, we cut average delivery times by 18%, slashed spoilage by 70%, and brought 2 new co-ops into the fold, smaller, but loyal. The work was honest, and the praise when it came was real. A handshake, a box of peaches from a farm in Georgia, a handwritten thank you note from a school principal whose lunch program got fresher produced that week. Meanwhile, back at my old company, they were drowning. I didn't need insider info, the silence told me everything. Drivers started showing up in our applicant queue. Experienced guys who used to drive for us, now looking for anywhere else to land. Vendors I'd worked with started calling Evan directly. One even joked, "Didn't you used to work with some finance wizard over there?" The one who thought insurance was optional. Colby's name was getting passed around, and not in the good way. Then one day I got an email from Becca. Finance still stuck over there. Subject: "You didn't hear this from me." She'd heard through the grapevine that Colby had just gotten pulled into a restructuring meeting. Apparently, the CEO who'd finally emerged from the executive Bermuda Triangle wanted answers. Losses are stacking. Clients are spooked. 2 more just canceled contracts citing reliability concerns, her email read. Oh, and they're doing a review of the Memphis shipment. Legal says you're in the clear. Everyone knows. Even him. I smiled when I read that. Not the smug kind of smile. The kind you get after running your hand along would you just sand it smooth or closing a box you built with your own tools. Clean work. Work that lasts. I didn't reply. Becca didn't expect me to. Some people don't need applause to know they were right. They just need the silence of their enemies losing the ground under their feet. It started with an email. Not from Becca. Not from Evan. From Colby himself. Subject line: "Let's connect." I almost laughed. It had been 3 months since I walked out of that office and straight into something better. 3 months since he tried to scapegoat me for a $780,000 loss. 3 months since I'd left without a word because I didn't need to argue, I'd already won. I opened the message. "Mike, hope you're doing well. Heard you landed with Greenstone, congrats. I'd love to pick your brain sometime. We're reevaluating some of our internal processes and I think your insights could be really valuable. Let me know if you're open to a quick call or coffee. No pressure, of course. Colby, pick my brain." I stared at those words like they were in a foreign language. The man who ignored my warnings, sliced my insurance coverage, blamed me to the board, and tried to throw our truck driver under the bus was now hoping I'd give him a cheat sheet. I didn't respond. Didn't even forward it to Evan. I just let it sit there, flagged and unread like a bad joke taped to a fridge. 2 days later, I got the second surprise. It wasn't an email. It was a knock on my damn office door. Colby. In person. Wearing a blue blazer that didn't fit quite as well as it used to and a face that had lost its usual smug glow. His smile faltered when I didn't rise from my desk. "Michael," he said, voice thinner than I remembered. I should have scheduled something, I know. But I was in the area and thought maybe we could just talk off the record. About? He shifted his weight. Cleared his throat. There's been some shakeups. Leadership's asking hard questions. We lost a few more contracts. The CEO wants solutions, not excuses. I leaned back in my chair. Let the silence do its work. Finally, he cracked. "Look, I know we didn't get off on the right foot. We got off on the right foot," I said. "Then you kicked it out from under me." He flinched. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said, hands raised. "I'm just trying to fix things. You built good systems. Clients respected you. Vendors trusted you. We could really use that perspective right now." "And what would I get?" I asked. "More blame? A tighter noose when the next load gets spoiled?" "No," he said quickly. "I'd make sure. I'd protect you this time. This time." That's when I knew he was done. Not because he was apologizing, he wasn't. Not really. But because a man like Colby doesn't beg unless the water's already at his chin. I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. "You should leave now," I said. He paused, swallowed. Michael, you broke it. I built something else. I didn't slam the door. I closed it slow. Let him hear the quiet. Let him live with it. The next week, I got another update from Becca. Colby had been laterally reassigned to a strategic projects role with no team and no budget. Corporate exile. The kind that doesn't come with a goodbye cake. And me? I was just getting started. I stood on the loading dock behind Greenstone's new cold storage warehouse, our warehouse, watching the morning shipments roll out. It was 6:12 a.m., the sun barely cresting the rooftops, painting the trucks in that golden, cinematic light that makes even steel and diesel look noble. Nancy waved from the cab of the lead truck. She was headed east with 14,000 pounds of hydroponic spinach and cage-free eggs, bound for 3 states. She gave me a thumbs up, then tapped the reefer monitor. I smiled. She was good. They were all good. 3 months into the new operation and we were running clean. No missed deliveries. No temperature violations. No panic meetings. Just quiet, clockwork logistics. The kind of thing people forget exists until it fails. But not this time. Not on my watch. Inside, Evan was already at his desk with a can of gas station iced coffee and a spreadsheet open like a crossword puzzle. He looked up as I came in. You see the numbers? Which ones? I asked. The ones from your old company. I raised an eyebrow. Rumor is they lost 1/3 of their cold freight clients. Word's out. Drivers are leaving, compliance is auditing, and their insurance carrier raised premiums across the board. I didn't say anything. Evan leaned back. Colby's name's radioactive. No one wants to touch him. He's still technically employed, but they put him in a special initiatives closet where good ideas go to die. He sipped his coffee. You want me to send him a fruit basket? I laughed. A real one. No, I said. Let the silence be the gift. And that was it. No viral speech. No courtroom scene. Just a slow collapse of a man who thought he could play CEO with other people's reputations. Colby had underestimated the value of restraint, of experience, of people who don't need applause to do their jobs right. And in the end, he'd fired the only person who might have saved him. But this isn't really a story about him. It's about what happens when you walk away instead of staying to fight. When you choose to build something better instead of fixing someone else's fire with your own water. I didn't win. There was no trophy. No check in the mail. Just a team I respected, a job I was proud of, and a version of myself that slept damn well at night. And that beat any promotion Colby could have waved under my nose. 1 week later, I got a letter. A printed one from a vendor we'd reconnected with. Small family outfit in Iowa we'd partnered with under the new system. It was handwritten, which was rare these days. Michael, I don't know what happened at your last place, but thank God you landed here. The industry needs more people like you. Thanks for treating us like partners, not pawns. Marcy and Doug T. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, next to the routing map and a Polaroid of our first outgoing load. I look at it sometimes when the days get long. And I remember, some bridges don't need to be burned. They collapse just fine on their own.